Hey guys, editing Bree here. You're only going to see me for about 2 seconds before we hop into the interview. Quickly want to tell you we are doing an interview today with Stephanie Zito, who is a freaking amazing travel hacker. She taught me how to travel hack with points and miles. She's been doing it for, I kid you not, 30 years. She's going to talk to us about the smartest and best ways to invest and what credit cards that she recommends, what tips and tricks she has for investing in points and miles or earning points and miles, and then how to trip plan using your points and miles. So if you're interested in learning more, building on Point Hacking 101, Point Hacking 102, stay tuned. We're going to get into it right now. Oh, hi, Stephanie. How are you?
Wonderful. So good
Thank
to
you
see
so
you.
much. Good to see you too. It's been a long time. It's been since Women's Travel Fest a couple years ago. So I have been super inspired by you, and you taught me everything that I know about travel hacking. And I'm sure there's plenty of things that you taught me that I did not remember and I've not remembered to tell people. So why don't you start by telling us just a little bit about who you are, what you do for a living?
Well, my name's Stephanie. On all things social media, I go by Wandering Zito. Not wandering, but wandering. Zito, like Z, like zipper, ITO. I am just mostly a regular person who loves to travel. I'm not a travel influencer. I'm not a professional traveler, but I've been traveling for quite a long time and have been travel hacking before it became popular on Instagram and TikTok. Started collecting points and miles when I was young and have just loved to do it ever since. And I lived overseas for 15 years in different places. I was kind of a nomad before nomads were digital. About 10 years ago, I decided I needed an anchor point because I had been overseas for so long. Kind of put some, I hesitate calling them roots, but a few roots down in Oregon because I think it's beautiful here and still travel from here. And love to teach people about points just because I feel like it helps people access travel.
So you said that you know your first points hacked
First
travel in 97?
points. My first travel hacking, my first points trip was 19. No, I'm lying. My first points trip was in 1994. My first solo trip was in 1997. Yeah.
And what made you decide to do that?
So I like to tell this story for all the old people out there who remember the Scholastic Book Fair. There used to be a book called Free Stuff for Kids, and this was my favorite book. And I don't know, I've just always been one of those people who has been motivated by collecting free stuff.
And so where did you go on that first trip?
Well, my first international trip that I used points on, I flew to London.
Heck yeah. Okay. And how many countries have you been to since?
I have been to 151.
Oh my gosh.
They're
How do
getting
you
close
keep
to half.
track? Where do you keep track? Do you have like a little notebook or a
I have a list that I've had in a spreadsheet for years that I add to, and it's part of my annual review. I make a list of all the countries I haven't been to. So in every journal, I have a list of the countries I have left of all the countries in the world, and then I cross them off every year.
incredible? And you have a trip coming up, right?
Do. I'm leaving in a couple of days. I'm going back to Australia and then I'm going to Timor-Leste.
Okay. Tell us more about that.
Well, I'm super excited. It's obviously a new country for me. It's not a very popular tourist destination. It's kind of a destination I feel like where I'm going to meet some like intrepid Australians because it's most easiest to get there from Australia. But apparently the coral reefs are phenomenal there. And it's one of the very few places in the world where you can see pygmy blue whales.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. You're going to have a really wonderful time. I'm so excited for
I
you.
love
So, a lot of people talk about having this maybe one transformational or transformative experience in travel. What was it for you?
I think I've always been really kind of driven by like exploration and discovery. But I think for me, I didn't grow up traveling internationally. I grew up in Pennsylvania. My family went to Florida twice a year to the same
Mhm.
place every year for vacation. And when I was in college, I had an opportunity to study in Europe. And I went, and I think it was something about that trip. Like the super cheesy quote, I've not been the same since I've seen the moonshine on the other side of the world. Like that was the
Yeah.
first time I ever heard that quote. There was something about going overseas for the first time and just having this like aha moment, like, it's not far. It's not far
Hmm.
and it's not hard. And this all of like the world exists simultaneously. And like just like I'm here, I can be anywhere. And I think that was just like,
Yeah.
I just want to keep doing this. So I
And
did.
how old were you when that
Uh,
happened?
I was 18 when I
Wow.
did that first trip.
It's amazing. Like those of us that grew up like that, I grew up the same way. And we were sent abroad when I was 16, just kind of spur of the moment, like a youth
Mhm.
conference. And I just was obsessed ever since that I didn't know that food could taste like that. I didn't know that peaches were were juicy. Like, I grew up in Arizona. I had a peach and it was all over my face. And I was like, what is this? It was like addicting to know that people can live so differently than you and your world is not the center of the universe. So you have been in my mind like this travel hacking queen. You know so much about this. You've done so much work. Some people watching may feel like traveling is really expensive, and to them it is really far away, and it is a lot. So, what advice would you give people who are just getting started, who might feel a little overwhelmed by the idea of travel hacking at all?
It is overwhelming. There are so many things that you can do, especially in the world of social media. I could probably name 50 bloggers just off the top of my head and Instagrammers who solely for their job create content about it. And I would say, first, one thing you can do is not watch all of them and think you have to do it all because you don't. You really don't have to do it all. You don't have to have every credit card there is, and you don't have to worry about optimizing your cents per value and all of that. The most important thing is before you look at anything to think about what you actually want, and yeah, just to get clear in your mind, how much time do you want to spend doing this? If you really want to go all in and spend a bunch of time, you can do it. But I think, if you make a decision on what you want to get out of it and kind of stick to that and do one thing at a time, you'll learn it. You'll learn it quickly and you don't have to do everything.
That's awesome. I think that's really good advice because it is super overwhelming with all of the different things that you can be doing.
Yeah, I think that is, as someone who's now been doing this for 30 years, which is crazy because I'm not a day over 32.
Same.
I will say I am a lifetime slash lifestyle travel hacker. And I go in seasons. There are times when I'm hardcore optimizing my purchases on everything. And there's times when I'm just like, I use my credit card, I get points, I do the things that are my routine. I don't really think too much about it.
Yeah.
So it can be in phases and you can do it long term.
So speaking of which, like, what is your personal approach normally?
I will say that my life is fairly well optimized. When I go to the store, I don't think about which credit card I have to use in which location. I have kind of my credit card strategy is in my head. I know which hotels I like. I know which airlines. I kind of have an idea of what's coming up for me in travel, where I need to be earning more, where I can kind of slack off. But that's not helpful for you if you're just starting. For me, the thing that is most helpful is not to think about this whole big giant picture of everything I can do to optimize everything, but to really start with one specific dream. And it doesn't matter what dream it is. It's your dream, don't listen to somebody and say like, oh, well, the best way to optimize your points is to go to Japan. If you don't want to go to Japan and you want to go to Nebraska, go to Nebraska, but start with what your goal is and then reverse engineer it. If you want to go to Australia, you want to fly to Sydney and you live in Phoenix, then what I would say is, where you want to go, you search for that. You can search on a regular Google Flights and see who flies there. You can use a point search tool like seat.arrow. You can use one of these tools and see what points programs you can use to get there. And then once you know what you need, then you work on earning that, right? So if I know I can fly from Phoenix to LA to Sydney on Qantas or American, I know I need One World miles because I learned that through my research process, and I can get those on American. I can get those on Alaska. I can get those using my Chase points through British Airways. I can use Capital One and transfer to Qantas. So there's lots of different ways you can get that flight. But if you just think like, oh, I'm going to earn a bunch of American miles, where can I go? Or I'm just going to earn a bunch of credit card miles and then try to use them, you don't always have the right points for the right thing. So if you think about a destination, just one destination that you have in mind, and then reverse engineer that, then make sure you get the right credit card for the points that you need. Then you book that ticket. And as you do that, you're learning all kinds of little steps that are going to help you do that next flight.
Gosh, that is so smart. So instead of looking at, okay, which credit card is the best credit card to get for all travel, especially if you're first starting out, then look at where do I want to go? What is my dream? And in this case, Australia as an example, what's my dream? And then back end, essentially engineer it back into what you need. That is so smart. I recently found Rome and loved playing around on Rome because I had never never experienced anything like that, and they use AI, and it actually, like, tells you which points programs to use and how to transfer it. So they just back your way into it.
Exactly. Whereas I think if you just hear about travel hacking and then, you start watching different influencers who are all going to tell you that you need the Amex Platinum card or the Chase Sapphire, one of the two Chase Sapphire cards, because
Uh-huh.
those are the cards that banks pay them to promote, then you're going to wind up with that card, but it might not be the card that you need. They're both good cards too, by the way.
Right.
No,
I agree. I love those cards.
no shade on those
But
cards. I have them
yeah,
all. But
yeah.
the best card for you might be an Alaska card or an American card. Very low barrier to entry. So when I think about my credit cards specifically, I have different credit cards that serve different purposes. I have credit card that I keep in my wallet and I use. I probably have about 30 credit cards. I won't lie.
That makes me feel so much better. I think I have like 10.
You do not need 30 credit cards. Remember, I've been doing this for 30 years. You do not need 30 credit cards. I have about 3 credit cards that I use. A business card I mostly use, and I have 2 personal cards that I mostly use for my everyday spending. Then I have a couple credit cards that I kind of weave in and out based on what things I need to be earning towards. Like right now, I am behind on earning my loyalty points for American for next year. Now that I've earned everything that I need to on some of those, I'm shifting some of my spend to my American card, which I don't normally use as my everyday card, but I keep that card because of other benefit I get for
Yeah.
it. Then I have cards that I've gotten solely and I pay for them every year. I hardly ever use them, but I solely keep them because of some amazing benefit they give me. And then there's cards that I get and I get them to get a bonus
Mhm.
and I'll keep them for a little while and then either downgrade them or churn them. By
Smart.
turning, I mean I'll close it and then open a new one or something.
Yeah.
And I will say, like, there are years when I open multiple cards because there's something I want to do with them. And then there are probably been a couple years where I've maybe opened one card or,
Yeah.
closed a card, or I haven't been super active in the card space. So
Yeah.
what I typically think is if I have some big spend coming up, I'll typically think, like, is this a good time to open a card? Because you always have to have some kind of big spend to meet that sign up bonus. And
Mhm.
I don't always have $6,000 I need to spend in 90 days on something. And so I typically think about it around the time of year when I have to pay my business taxes because
Mhm.
I pay a big business tax bill. And so, granted, I have to pay a certain percentage if you're paying taxes with a credit card, but I always do the math. And, if I'm going to get 90,000 points by paying an extra $300 on my taxes, well, I can buy a business class ticket somewhere for
Yep.
90,000 points. So that's kind of worth me investing in getting a new card at that time. So,
Absolutely. That's great advice. And how do you, knowing that you have these different cards in different areas and knowing that you have different plans and different goals of where you're planning, it's a two-part question. One, how do you sort of plan out where you're going to go? And with that, how do you track and plan out your credit card hacking in advance?
I kind of have an ongoing list. I mean, I've been working on trying to go everywhere for a really long time, and I have a list of the countries I haven't been to. And I've been working on this list for a really long time. So I kind of have it in my head. And I also kind of know each year, like, what's practical and what is kind of on my radar. And sometimes something surprises me. Like, for example, on the trip I'm going on next week, I was originally trying to go to the Marshall Islands, not to
Oh,
East Timor, but I couldn't make the flights work. And then the flights to Timor worked. So that actually wasn't on my radar. I kind of have those things in my mind. I kind of always have the ongoing list of places I kind of interested in, or
yeah.
sometimes I'll see like a flight deal somewhere and I kind of know the connection points in my head already.
Yeah.
And so kind of like having that on my radar, I'm kind of always working towards it. I will
Okay.
say for me, I've been a one world flyer for a really, really long time. I
Mhm.
lived in Asia for 7 years and I would like to fly Cathay Pacific as much as possible. And so I've had executive platinum status on American forever. So I always have lots of American miles. They're kind of
Mhm.
always my backup. But I'm always earning kind of in a flexible reward program. So I kind of always have that kind of on the back burner as well. And a lot of my Chase points I know I can transfer easily to Star Alliance flights, and my American points I can use for One World. So unless I really need to go somewhere on a Delta flight, and there's still like you can kind of go through the back door for Delta and book through Chase points for flying blue. I
Yes.
kind of always have in my head, a little stash of points that I can move around in different places.
A little running puzzle.
Exactly, exactly. And so that makes it possible when I kind of get a hankering to go to a specific place to go there. It's
Interesting. So
completely the opposite advice I gave you as to start with an idea and reverse engineer it. I feel like once you do that and can kind of reverse engineer it, once you do that a couple of times, you'll understand how the alliances work and you'll understand where you
yeah.
can move your point. And
Yeah.
it just feels less overwhelming because you are running the race for the first time. It's always easier to run the race the second time because you know the course.
Exactly.
Right?
So you bring up a really interesting point with that because you were talking about one world and sort of how you stick to one world. Talk to us a little bit about what like a typical travel hack might look like, or if you've had a recent experience or an example that you want to give us of exactly how you manipulated points and miles to get yourself on a trip, maybe through one world or through one of the alliances.
I did a trip in May, so it's just a few months ago, and I wanted to go to the South Pacific. I flew to Fiji, and Fiji Airways is kind of their sort of one world, part of the One World Alliance. And if you don't know what an alliance is, there's basically three primary groups. When I teach people about travel hacking, I talk about family and friends and how almost every airline in the world belongs to its own family. And the family is an alliance. And there's three families: Star Alliance, One World Alliance, and SkyTeam. And then there's some orphan airlines who don't belong to a family, but they have friends. And so some of these airlines, like JetBlue, they're not in an alliance, but they're friends with some of the airlines that are in an alliance. So you can use JetBlue points to fly on some airlines, but not all of them. So American Airlines is in the One World family. So that's kind of the story around alliances. Fiji Airways is it's like a stepsister to the One World Alliance. They're kind of working their way into the family, but they're not a full member of the family yet. So you can use, to fly on Fiji Airways, you can use American miles that you book. If you have the miles in American, you call American to book a flight on Fiji Airways. If
Oh,
you have Alaska miles, you can book Fiji Airways. If you have Qantas miles, you can book Fiji Airways, all because they're all in that family and Fiji Airways has a connection to that family. And it sounds really complicated, but it's not. And I will tell you that it was less points for me to fly to Fiji than it is for me to fly from Portland to Hawaii on points.
come on.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's and people are like, "You went all the way to Fiji?" And I was like, "Couple hours past Hawaii," and it was like I flew Portland, LA, Fiji, and then Fiji to Tonga on one ticket for 30,000 points.
Real
Yeah,
serious.
and
And those were American miles you had, and you used those and transferred them to Fiji.
no, so you don't transfer the miles. So
Okay.
when you're booking, so it's if you're earning your points in an airline program, you cannot
Okay.
move those points. They live in the bucket where you earned them. The exception is if you are earning flexible points in credit card program. So if you're earning your points from Chase, Ultimate Rewards points, those points you're earning them through Chase, they live in Chase. You can spend them with the Chase travel portal, or you can move them from Chase to one of their partners. But once you move them out of the Chase bucket into an airline bucket or a hotel bucket, they live there. You can't move them backwards.
Okay.
But so, like, say if you're earning points from flying on American, those points live in your American account. If you're earning American points from a Citibank card, you're earning those points in your American account. Citibank can't take your American points away.
Right. Okay.
If you're earning from Barclays, they're going into your American account. Now, once they're in your American account, you can redeem them for a partner airline, but you have to do it through the airline where the points live.
Okay.
So, for example, I would go to the American website or to the American reservations and call and say, I'm looking for availability on a flight from LA to Fiji. And then
Okay.
I use the American points for that.
So cool.
Right. And so in that case, I used American points for some of my flights. I went to Fiji and I went to Tonga and Samoa and Tuvalu all on that same trip because Fiji kind of serves like a hub and spoke for a lot of Oceania.
Okay.
And it was crazy because I got all the way to Tonga on the one flight and then it was 7,000 miles, 7,000 Alaska miles to fly back between any of those countries. I spent 3 weeks in Fiji and then the other three countries, and it was less than 100,000, 80,000 miles.
That's incredible.
So,
That's a flight to Europe and back.
yeah.
Wow. So when you're talking about your flexible earning, you're talking about specifically like these flexible rewards programs. You're talking about credit cards.
When I'm saying a flexible point, I'm talking about Chase Ultimate Rewards, American Express membership rewards point, City Thank You point, Built Rewards. Those are kind of the main ones where you're earning in the bank, and then you decide what you're going to do with the points.
So let's talk a little bit about kind of what current travel hacking looks like now. So you've been doing it for 30 years now. Can you talk to us a little bit about what hacking space looks like now and maybe what we're going to be seeing in the future?
Well, I would say travel hacking, the points and miles world is always changing. And anybody who's been doing it for like more than 4 months will be like, oh, I remember 4 months ago you could do this. 1 year ago you could get money orders. 10 years ago you could buy quarters off the internet. And so the one thing that is constant about the points and miles world is change, right? And you'll hear a lot about earn and burn. And that is you earn miles and you spend miles. There is no compound interest in miles. There is nothing but devaluation. And so you should plan on that. You know, it used to cost 80,000 points to go round trip first class to Asia on Cathay Pacific. And like, if you can even find a ticket first class on Cathay Pacific for like any miles now, it's a miracle. But there will be devaluation, but there's also different opportunities. Like, it's way easier. There's so much competition in the credit card space that there's plenty of ways to earn points and get points. And there's always a new card because all the banks are trying to one up each other. I don't know. That could change. It could all change.
Well, I've wondered if with the emergence of AI and all the kind of things that AI can help you hack. So I was curious, I wonder, because some of these websites are doing it so well now, do you think that if more people take advantage of it, do you think point hacking could go away? Do you think that points and miles could lessen?
I think it will keep changing. I think it will keep changing. And the more people are doing it, the more competition there will be to get, there's only so many seats on airplanes too, but they're not giving you anything for free. The points and miles programs of the airline make enormous revenues.
Really?
Yes, they do. And all of these credit cards that are giving you points, it's basically their ad and marketing spend. They're paying the airlines for the point. Like, there's nothing free about it, and so it will change. I 100% guarantee that it will change. I will say that prior to COVID, there weren't sites like Point.me and
Right.
Arrow. Like, those are really new. When Point.me started, that was really huge in the space. Like 10 years ago, if you wanted to find out if there was a Cathay Pacific seat available through American Airlines, you had to know that you had to search on the Qantas website because that was the only website that would show you the availability. So those sites have already completely revolutionized the ability for an average person to search. Honestly, it has made it harder to get those unicorn tickets. To fly in Etihad seats, you used to have to call the Etihad number in Australia because the US number couldn't see the flight availability. So it has changed a lot. It's going to keep changing. If you don't like change, it's not really a game that you probably want to play. I would say I'm always earning. Keep in mind, if I'm using all my points, how am I going to keep earning them? So I have points when I want them for the next thing. But you'll also meet people who just really get a thrill out of earning the points and then never use them too. In fact, I don't remember what year it's from now, maybe 2022 or something, but their Bankrate did a survey on the percentage of people who don't use their credit card points. And it's crazy. It's like 69% of people don't use the points.
Come on.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people, it's easier to earn them. It can be more complicated to figure out how to use them. Or you just you're like, oh, well, I don't want to use them to go to like my grandmother's birthday because I want to save them for when I really need them for like this huge trip. But you can always get a deal, right? Like, you can mostly almost always find a deal. And if you can't find a deal on a trip, you probably can't find points on it either.
Meanwhile, there's people like us that I get 500 points and I'm like, what can I spend this on?
Uh-huh.
Where can I go? I'm like, I have points. Let's fly somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm living on that kayak explore page. So let me ask you another question and then we'll wrap up here in just a sec. Is there anything in particular, any travel points program or interesting program that you think that most people overlook that they should be paying attention to? Other than obviously people need to be spending their points, but is there anything that that people should look into?
Well, I think Alaska's a great program. They've got a great credit card. It is becoming more popular, so I think more people do know about it. But especially now that they're in One World, you can do tons of stuff with their points. And they also have a lot of other partners too that you could redeem points through. That's a good one. There's some other outliers, like Air Canada sometimes has, cheaper redemptions on United flights than United does. So for example, I did a trip 2 years ago to Palau, which is also in the South Pacific. I'm working on the South Pacific right now. So that trip, I flew United there, and it was at the tail end of COVID. Actually, United was the only international flight that went into the country, but it was way cheaper to book that flight through Air Canada than it was to book through United on a United plane.
Wow.
And I learned that because I searched it on one of those tools like Appoint.me or SeatZero. Because if you aren't using a tool like that, then the only other way to do it is to check the flight on all the other websites to know what
Yeah.
other airlines are in the alliance and to check them. And it's just a lot more work. There's a lot of great tools. I would say play with them all and see which one you like. And it's worth like if you really want to learn, it's worth to, pay for one for a couple months or something. And you don't need them all. You don't have to be an expert at all of them. Most of them do the same thing. Find the
Yeah.
one that, the interface works the best for you.
So, I just want to ask you before we go, just a little bit more about your humanitarian work. So, I was just curious how travel or solo travel has helped your humanitarian work and maybe what's next for you wandering for good.
Yeah. So for me, one of the reasons that I really like to teach people about points is I feel like for me, the opportunity that I had to access travel really shaped my worldview. I think you can, especially in the world that we're living in, people have their own worldview. I kind of disagree with the whole theory that, like travel helps you find yourself. I think that travel really shapes what you believe about the world. When you sit in your own house, the world seems really scary. When you watch the news, the world seems really scary. But when you go somewhere and you like sit in a taxi with a driver who tells you about his kids, you realize like, oh, like, yeah, when I watch the news, the world seems scary, but 99.9% of the world is doing what you're doing every day. They're like thinking about what they're going to eat for dinner and how they're going to feed their kids and where they're going to go to school. And they're just interested in learning about you and you're interested in learning about them. And for me, like connecting with people around the world is one of the most noble and interesting things about travel. Yeah, there's beautiful things to see, but interacting with people just really helped shape my mindset. And you can tell people like, oh, it's actually not scary in Oman, but people who watch the news all the time and sit at home might not believe you. So for me, if I can help somebody take a trip that they think they can't take and that helps them change the way they think, then I think that is amazing.
Well, yeah, and I agree with you. It's more about going around the world and like connecting with people and understanding that we're all kind of more alike than we think, right?
Exactly.
Well, I appreciate you so much. Tell the viewers today where we can find you again, and if they have any questions for you or if they're interested in talking to you more, where can they find you?
You can find me on the interwebs at wandering for good, wandering for good.com. And you can also find me on all of the social media at wandering Zito.
Awesome. Well, thank you. You have been so helpful. We so appreciate you, and we will talk to you later.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Guys, thank you so much for being here. This is Editing Bree here again. Thank you for being here for this episode today. I love you guys. I'll see you next week.